Hey there, beautiful souls.
In this scene between
Welcome
Sunny
to
and
another
M,
episode
the atmosphere
of
vibrates with a
Queer
kind of
Spirits.
unseen
We
electricity.
dive into LGBTQ
Not the cheap charge of
history
shock or
and the
spectacle,
paranormal.
but the deeper current of emotion that
Sunny,
rises when
and this
two
is
women
Em,
connect
your
across
guides
layers
through
of
the
time, identity, and
supernatural.
repression.
Today,
The
we
moment
have
begins
something
softly,
quite
almost
extraordinary
innocently,
in
with
store
M
for our
asking if
viewers.
Sunny feels anything. The question lands with multiple meanings. It's about the paranormal, sure, but also about presence, emotion, intimacy. Sunny's answer, that the energy feels electric, signals that something transformative is happening, something beyond the literal. When she says the room feels alive with more than just memories, we can read that as a metaphor for the persistence of queer love itself. Even when erased or forgotten, it lingers, it hums beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged. Their listeners become witnesses, much like society at large. A kind of invisible audience hearing, but perhaps not fully understanding what's being expressed between two women daring to reach across an emotional threshold. The supernatural framing of the scene becomes a brilliant device for expressing what queer people, especially queer women, have long experienced. That love between women has often been treated as something ghostly, haunting, otherworldly. Not because it is unnatural, but because society has, for generations, rendered it invisible, repressed it into the realm of whispers and afterlives. When M says the energy feels charged, the line captures both the literal ghostly charge and the emotional weight of being seen, or finally feeling something that was always there, waiting to break through the static. Then comes the pivotal shift, the moment Sunny becomes a conduit, a vessel for someone else's story. When she speaks as Julia, it blurs the line between possession and embodiment. Yet rather than reading this as horror, it's an act of reclamation. Sunny doesn't lose herself. She becomes a bridge between past and present, carrying the voice of a woman who once loved and perhaps was never allowed to love freely. In that instant, the scene suggests something profound about queer lineage. How modern queer women often carry the echoes of those who came before, those whose stories were silenced, whose loves were buried in coded letters or lost to history. When Sunny, as Julia, says, "I love you, Julia," it's as if time folds in on itself. She is both the lover and the loved, mirroring how many queer people have had to build their own reflections of love before finding it in another. The intimacy is not about bodies, it's about souls recognizing themselves across time. The supernatural becomes a metaphor for memory, for the persistence of love that refuses to die no matter how many generations try to exorcise. The scene's brilliance lies in its refusal to sensationalize what's happening. Instead, it lingers in emotional realism. The trembling voice, the awe, the small gasps of recognition. When M, still in her role as the grounded observer, says, "Sunny, has the spirit taken over your body?" It feels less like fear and more like concern, like the way queer love often asks, "Is it safe to feel this? Is it safe to be this open?" The scene becomes about trust. Sunny is vulnerable, and M must decide whether to meet her there or retreat behind disbelief. The emotional choreography between them mirrors how queer relationships often unfold. Tentative steps between belief and fear, intimacy and self-protection. When Sunny whispers, "I've missed you," it's an echo of every queer woman who has ever felt the ache of separation, from her lover, from her own truth, from a world that doesn't make room for her tenderness. What's extraordinary here is how the film resists making this connection feel forbidden or fetishized. Instead, it frames it as sacred. The phrase "they were in love," a love that defies time, lands not as a cliché, but as a thesis statement. Love between women has always defied time because it has had to. From Sappho to modern queer cinema, it persists despite erasure. The idea that their love defies time also speaks to how queer women often inherit emotional blueprints from the past. The need to conceal, the longing to be seen, the joy of recognition, and yet still create new forms of connection that feel eternal. The spirit possession is not horror, it's healing. The past is finally allowed to speak through the present. When Sunny begins saying, "Put your hands on me, Julia, and I love you," the moment risks being misunderstood by an audience conditioned to see intimacy between women through a voyeuristic lens. But the direction and tone pull it elsewhere. This isn't about consumption, it's about communion. The intensity comes not from desire, but from reunion, from the ache of something once forbidden now spoken aloud. Queer women watching this scene might recognize that feeling. The first time you say "I love you" out loud and realize it doesn't summon shame or consequence, only relief. That freedom, the right to feel without filtering it through fear, is what the scene quietly celebrates. By the time M says listeners, Julia, has had its spirits enter her body. Her words stumble, caught between explanation and awe. This is a queer moment of translation. How do you explain something so intimate, so unquantifiable to an audience that might not understand? It's reminiscent of how queer people have long had to narrate their own experiences to others who can't quite see what they see. There's a vulnerability in that exposure. The film smartly keeps M's voice steady yet uncertain, reflecting the delicate balance queer women maintain when trying to validate their experiences in a world that still questions them. The later lines, "It's been so long, you're even more beautiful, I love you," play like an incantation of healing. The repetition mirrors how longing often loops in queer love, especially when so much of that love has historically been interrupted or cut short. The women's voices, one channeling the past, one witnessing the present, blend into something neither wholly paranormal nor entirely real. It's emotional resurrection. It asks the viewer, what happens when we allow women's love stories to transcend the limits of realism, to be both ghostly and grounded, both loss and life? The answer is that we find something universal in it, the ache of wanting to be remembered, to be touched by memory, and yet still live fully now. This scene, for queer and lesbian viewers, can feel deeply personal because it's not just about Sunny and M, it's about all the Julias, all the women who were never allowed to say I love you without disguise. It becomes a cinematic seance for them. The emotional gravity of that can't be overstated. Queer women, particularly those who grew up without seeing themselves reflected on screen, understand the necessity of these haunted metaphors. Sometimes, the only way to tell the truth about being invisible is to make it literal, to let the ghosts speak. For women more broadly, even beyond sexuality, the scene taps into the universal hunger to be fully seen. To have someone look at you and not just recognize your beauty, but your existence. The dialogue "you're even more beautiful" hits hard not because it flatters, but because it acknowledges survival. In a world that tells women to disappear, to silence their emotions, this simple affirmation becomes radical. It says, "You are still here, still radiant, even after time and pain and distance." That's why the scene resonates. It's not about ghosts, it's about endurance. Culturally, the discomfort some viewers might feel watching two women share this kind of intimacy, even under the veil of the supernatural, reveals how far society still has to go. When heterosexual love stories are treated as universal, queer love still often has to justify its existence through metaphor. But by using the language of the paranormal, this film subverts that double standard. It says, fine, if you think our love is invisible, let's make it the very fabric of haunting, so potent that it refuses to be ignored. It forces viewers to reckon with how otherworldly they have made something entirely human. In the end, this scene isn't about possession, it's about liberation. Sunny doesn't lose herself when Julia's love flows through her, she expands. M doesn't recoil from it, she witnesses it with reverence. The spirits are not monsters, they are memories. The haunting is not a curse, it's a love letter that finally reaches its destination. For queer women, this is the essence of recognition. The knowledge that your story, your desire, your tenderness, are not aberrations but continuations. The electric energy that begins the scene never dissipates, it hums on, reminding us that love, real love, queer love, women's love, never truly dies. It lingers, it glows, and it waits to be felt again.